first of all, before we get into that, I want to say something that most marketers don't. I don't know if they agree with me or not, but I believe that brand is primarily not built by marketing. I think marketing plays a role. If it's done really well, it maybe adds to brand. At the very least, it doesn't take away from brand. And when it's done poorly, it degrades the brand.
Welcome to another episode of Brews and BizDev. Today, our illustrious guest is Barry Enderwick, who is, amongst other things, co-founder and partner of Kaizen Creative Partnership and a former director of marketing at Netflix, which you may or may not have heard of. Barry, why don't you just go ahead? First of all, thanks for coming on. As we just chatted about, so there are some things going on outside on the West Coast right now that are, even more danger pending than we have normally going for our 2020. So I appreciate being able to stick to this and get this done. I know we've been trying to get this done for what seems like 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, but this is a happy diversion, so I'm okay. I'm very happy.
Okay, good. So why don't you just go ahead and kind of introduce yourself to everybody, give us your elevator pitch, as they say.
My elevator pitch. I am passionate about the fact that marketing is both brand and performance-based. It's brand-driven, but everything is measured. And it's what we did at Netflix. My time, I spent 11 years at Netflix. My background originally was in graphic design. And over the course of 11 years, I got to learn about brand positioning because we repositioned the brand in 2004. Learned about customer acquisition and conversion, comms, PR, strategy. It was like going to the best business school I could go to, and I got paid. So it was amazing. So I am all about the idea of, you build a company to grow from, obviously from a standpoint of making money and stuff, but you also grow it to build a brand that people can relate to and want to buy again from and have certain feelings for. And I'm not saying they necessarily build a relationship because people don't think of it as a relationship, but that is kind of what you're doing. You're getting an emotional connection to them.
Yeah.
And I can go into that forever.
Nice. Yeah, that's we'll be returning to it shortly, I feel like. First things first, right? Let's get the important stuff done and crack open our beers. But first, why don't you tell us about what beer you're featuring and why?
Well, I am featuring Pine Tar Incident, a West Coast IPA. I chose this for multiple reasons. One, I got completely burned out on hazies, Northeast style hazy beers. I love them. I still love them, but I just got completely burnt out. So I had to go West Coast old school. Yep. And shamelessly, I own a small piece of Strike Brewing Company, which makes this beer. So
excellent.
I kind of plug them as well. What are you enjoying?
An actual connection. I'm going with Big Ditch.
Okay.
There we go. Big Ditch Brewery. Hayburner, it's called, an American IPA. Which, I guess I don't really know enough about beer to make, what makes it American IPA versus American Pale Ale I've seen. So like once you start breaking it down that much, I get a little unclear, but this is my go-to. And I'd say, and I have friends and clients and whatnot at other breweries, so I don't say this lightly, but out of all this small brewery kind of movement we've had, certainly in the country, and we've got a lot of it in Buffalo because we really like beer here. Hayburner, Big Ditch has managed to get the most penetration easily with Hayburner. So now there's a couple other ones who are trailing behind, but it's the one where, even if I'm out of the city and I'm driving out, an hour and a half into the woods somewhere and I stop at some gas station, they're pretty likely to have at least some Hayburner there. So I like that you can get it anywhere. And in my experience, it's one of the more crushable, as people say, beers, right? It doesn't have too much bitterness or too much of anything to make it a slow going one, which is dangerous because it is 7.2 ABV. So it's crushable and will crush you if you're not paying attention.
Well, it's interesting. I see terms like American IPA, and it's like, okay, I know what the West Coast IPA is, but even that has changed. Back in the day, back in the early '90s, West Coast IPA or early 2000s, West Coast IPA would have a malt backbone and have bitterness to it, like a strong hop bitterness to it. And now there's West Coast IPAs, and there's not a lot of business to them, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
Although I still enjoy a blind pig every once in a while from Russian River Brewing Company.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that they got distribution. Strike. It's funny. The reason why I own a small piece of this is because we took equity in lieu of cash, because we helped them with their branding. I still design all their labels,
Nice.
and we helped get them distribution, so they're distributed throughout California. So that's really been, that was pre-pandemic, and that has really been a lifesaver during the pandemic. They've been able to do to-go sales. They've also had that background of retail continuing to sell.
Yeah.
Very fortunate.
Yeah, it's an interesting environment out there. All right, let's crack.
All right. And you got me beat at 7.2. Mine's 7% ABV. So.
Okay. All right. I'll be a little ahead of you. Cheers.
Cheers. I'm doing a.
Yeah, I go straight from the can.
I do too sometimes, but
I forgot my koozie. I forgot to bring my koozie in.
A little fancy, so. Cheers. That is good.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Now to the less serious stuff. Let's talk about some marketing and some biz dev. So I know in some brief exchanges before, and you just kind of explained it pretty well, where you're all about the integration, right? You're all about how all the pieces work together. It's about brand, it's about performance, and then obviously there's these humans and sales and then customer success. And this is all connected, right? So in the world of brand, and actually kind of interestingly, we've got this series. Dan and I, the owner of this, came up with this idea apparently separately like a few years ago, where he had done something called Brews and Branding, because he also, the ownership of this company, started off as designers, right? Graphic designers, and then branched out and got into the marketing and as that goes, similar to your story.
Yep.
And, in his perspective, right, what he would call brand and branding encompasses really everything. Right. And I was coming at it and we're trying to think like, all right, if we're going to revive that, are we going to use the name branding? Because while I believe that also, that's not how other people relate to it as far as I can tell. Right. When people hear branding, they hear graphic design, the logo, they hear the logo and those kinds of things. And so I wanted to be something that had a wider application and included sales. And so for me, I'm really using BizDev like the old school business development, right?
Gotcha.
Where actually you're encompassing marketing, sales, and customer service, and then what, strategic partnerships or whatever those kinds of things is all business development. So this is BizDev because I wanted to be talking to a lot of different people, whether it's performance marketers, whether it's heads of marketing, and they're just dictating communications, and SDRs, right? The modern folks and the salespeople out there slinging stuff. So I believe BizDev kind of covers all that in a certain way. And from a different perspective, branding also kind of covers all that in a certain way. And I know you were interested in talking about how content and value-added marketing is similar in some ways, which some people don't catch, to the sales kind of side of like the BizDev activities.
Right. Providing outsized value really goes a lot. It's kind of weird. Well, first of all, before we get into that, I want to say something that most marketers don't. I don't know if they agree with me or not, but I believe that brand is primarily not built by marketing. I think marketing plays a role. If it's done really well, it maybe adds to brand. At the very least, it doesn't take away from brand. And when it's done poorly, it degrades the brand. And the bulk of brand building comes from experience, customer service, website, how the website flows, what kind of things you're getting merchandised. It's all about experience for the customer, more so than a banner ad, or more so than a print ad, or more so than an Instagram post. But yeah, to the extent that content marketing and any sort of the way to think about that for me is that you want to provide outsized value, and if you can provide outsized value, people are more attracted to what you're offering for sale. Even if the stuff that you're providing and the outsized value is not for sale, it's free. It's still value, and it's still building a connection with those people.
Yeah, and that's critical piece for anyone who's doing I'll say doing sales well, right? Where it's like the relationship, but it's not some kind of you have a bot that's like automated messaging someone to death with irrelevant messages. In this series in particular, we've talked a lot about those things, whether it's LinkedIn or of course email plays like that. And, some of us, especially who are a little more on the strategic side and a little more interested in brand, even as you just distinguished it, hate those things, right? And there's like a sea of garbage, nonsense, spamming happening out there, which then gets equated as if marketers and salespeople needed any more bad associations with them. Like that's the world that people are living in. And if you take LinkedIn, I mean, seems like a billion more people on there, which is really kind of tossed it up, and now their algorithms shifting all around, and it's hard to see what's going on. But what hasn't stopped and has only picked up has been that kind of bad outreach, creating a terrible experience for people from the get-go.
Yep.
Playing the volume game. I understand why, the supposed reasons. So, so that's something that we've focused on quite a bit, and trying to put out also like alternatives, right? It's one thing to be able to talk crap about everything that's happening, another thing to provide some sort of a solution. So what is something, as you've looked out there and you're, kind of paying attention to what's happening out there, whether it's through those platforms or just in general, what do you see as kind of like the big mistakes that people are making in their outreach, whether that's marketing or where marketing and kind of sales development are lined up? Like, what do you think are the mistakes? And do you have any ideas for the fix, right? Do you have any ideas for how people could start engaging differently and get some different results that don't take, for example, a year to build? Because some folks right now, I get the struggle, right? I get why the press is on. But, is there something they can do, whether creating a better experience through brand, through marketing? Like, how can these people do something different that will still actually engage them and generate some kind of business down the
line? I think there's a few things that they can do. First of all, they can stop talking about themselves. They can stop talking about what they offer and start talking in terms of benefits. So let's say on LinkedIn, I get tons of connection requests, and in the connection request is a pitch for a sale, some sort of sale, and it's like, you are automatically deleted. I can't abide by that. But if, say I was to post something and the person followed me and they saw that they had written a blog post that was germane to something that I just posted about, and they reached out and said, hey, don't know if you saw this, but regarding the post that you just put up on LinkedIn, we thought you might like to read this because it provides this kind of perspective, this kind of perspective. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll check that out. Now that gets me to their website. It gets me reading their blog. It gets me curious who they are. And I've been provided value. And that's what I was talking about earlier about providing outsized value without the expectation of reciprocation, immediate reciprocation, right? And then, again, talking less, like I see on marketing materials, sales materials, where it's just like, we're the best way to do X. And it's like, that's not why people buy anything. No one buys it because it's the best way to do something. They buy it because of whatever benefit they derive from it. And it's really easy for marketers and copywriters to get into the rut of, we're the best HR software out there. It's like, okay, what does that actually say to me as a customer, a potential customer? It doesn't say anything other than you think your shit doesn't stink, so to speak. Just do a little bit more, take more of a perspective from the customer's point of view, and what are the benefits, not the features, the benefits. Because another mistake people make is they start listing off, well, we got this, we got this, we got this. And it's like, stop. What does that mean to me? Don't make me figure it out, because I'm gone if I have to do it. So. Yeah.
You have to make your way through a lot of messaging or whatever it is before you get to the point that's relevant to you. And none of us are making our way through that much content to get to the point, right? There are better options.
We actually, there's one other thing that we do at Kaizen is we follow kind of the Sandler method of sales, if you will. And that's very much, we like it because it comes from a point of view of, we're not trying to get everyone as a customer. Every company that we speak to, we're not trying to land them as a customer. What we're trying to do is evaluate what they need, where they are, what their ability to tackle is and what their willingness to tackle the problems are. And if they all line up and they line up with what we offer, let's try and work. We'll figure out how to work together. If they don't, we'll say we're not right for you, or we can help you find someone else that can actually do what you want to get done.
Mm-hmm.
And it has fundamentally changed us from being, all right, we got to go in, we got to pitch, we got to figure this out, we got to win this sale, to, all right, let's see where we're at. And it takes the pressure off us, it takes the pressure off them, and it helps them to clarify, the potential clients, helps them to clarify for themselves what they actually are willing to do, can do, that's and what they need to do.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I found that's usually a pretty good, out of all the sales systems and sales methods, and there's countless, and they've been around forever. And I mean, Sandler is not new, right? I mean, it's
no. And we're not acolytes, we're not religious fanatics, but we just like that concept of approaching it from that perspective, as opposed to we don't have like Sandler books and all that kind of stuff.
Right. You're not doing the webinars. But that the approach of you're there to figure out if it's a fit, and have that not be bullshit, right? Because people say that, and then they're into the pitch and they're overcoming, they're doing all the tricks versus actually trying to figure that out. I was always, spin selling was good that way too, where it's very question based, right? It's like, listen, we're trying to figure something out together, and if the answer is no, great. Which I find to be very complementary to what people would call inbound. Right, inbound marketing. I mean, we're a HubSpot partner, so we talk a lot about inbound marketing and that whole idea. The modern version, not the 5 years version, but I've always found it interesting because I'll see companies who are engaging that kind of approach, and then also they've got a real outbound, a kind of like actual methodology in their sales system where people they're still hunters, right? They're still doing all the normal activities, and there's a conflict. I mean, internally there has to be a conflict, and certainly externally, like the experience of what that company is when they're talking about one thing, and hey, if we're not a fit and we're this and we're just trying to add value, and then you got someone coming at you on the phone and in your inbox, just like not, it's a bad look.
Well, it's funny. A friend of mine that I worked with at Netflix, who's now CMO over a company called Circle CI, which is basically they allow coders to test and vet their code and reintegrate their code automatically using AI. So it's a lot faster, so they can deploy faster. And the way they've got it set up, and this was new to me, just because I was at Netflix, I've done direct to consumer, I've done B2B, but this is different to me in that they have the marketing qualified leads, they can get handed off to the sales team and the sales qualified leads, right? So it's more of a marketing does its job to build awareness and get people to inquire. Sales does the job to figure out if they're a good fit, if they're the right thing, and then it goes, which I think is a very smart way to approach it, as opposed to bifurcation.
Yeah, exactly. Confusing everybody, and I think, and I've seen some folks approach that, and I know sometimes there's a gap, particularly in B2B and a lot in B2B SaaS, where then that handoff isn't great, right? And this is usually about what the compensation plan is, like what marketers are getting judged on, like what the marketing department's actually getting paid for, versus, if that's leads, just like as an agency, right? If you're getting paid on like, hey, cool, we can generate leads, then you can, sure, we'll generate leads. That's not, generating MQLs is really not that difficult. Generating well-established ones that actually become SQLs and actually turn into revenue, so that you're aligning, your pay and your activities and working together, is a very different scenario, and scarily uncommon so far.
That's unfortunate, because I totally agree. Like, he has set up like, these are the parameters on which we judge whether or not this MQL is worth pursuing. And then same with SQL. Like, there's a defined set of like parameters that they have to fall into for them to move forward. So I agree with you, though. Why would you not have that defined? Because then you're just incentivizing people to do work. A lot of it.
Right. Yes. But look at these numbers, right? Look how many leads came in.
It's kind of like in marketing when people talk about impressions that they get for their ad. It's like, or even click-throughs. It's like, okay, click-through rate is a metric.
Yeah.
but what's the conversion on it?
Yeah, what I've seen when people count clicking through as a conversion, right? That's really something.
Talk about trying to justify your paycheck.
Yes, yes, and I would assume and justify your existence to yourself as you fall asleep at night, because
Yeah.
you got to know you're not generating anything of real value.
I
But
know.
I guess some folks are more okay with that than others. As long as that
I
page.
think that's going to keep changing, though. I think that the days of being able to float by on that kind of approach are dwindling, and
Yeah.
rightfully so. They should. So yeah, but hopefully.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, and I find it's there's a way, certainly at the smaller business side, where organizations who were traditionally sales based, right? It's just people out there making relationships, doing the networking, all that kind of stuff, who then start to come into the digital world in the 21st century and want to start updating things, are
Mhm.
pretty susceptible to those pitches.
Yeah.
People, because they're not talking the same thing, but they don't realize it, right? Those companies don't realize that when these folks are talking leads, they're talking the weakest leads you've ever seen. So when you say, yeah, we'll generate 10 additional leads every month if you're selling a high ticket B2B kind of a thing, it's like, holy crap, like, yes, that should double our revenue, and of course it doesn't.
Nope.
But because they don't know any better, and because they're not, let's say online types, even in general, like, they're not caught up, they're not informed, and so they don't know what to look for, and they're still living in the world of buyer beware. Whereas the
Right.
rest of if you're actually on the internet, it's more seller beware. You should be able to vet what's happening.
Mhm.
But those, and I'm sitting
Yeah.
here in Buffalo. It's a target for us as an agency, right? Is like, yes, we can help people come and modernize, but we're still cleaning up messes based on the last person that went in and sold, whatever, some kind of crappy website because it seemed cheap, and they got a like dirt cheap website, and they've got analytics that aren't even plugged in right, and they're generating leads and like fake conversions and giving reports that look cool, but since your client doesn't know what you're talking about anyway, there's no bounce back. I mean, I've seen some really nasty stuff, and and I don't know, and maybe you have an idea, maybe not, because I hadn't thought about this prior to this recording. This is all just coming up now. Like, what can be put in place, right, to help those kinds of businesses from getting taken advantage of because they don't even know what they're getting into. How can people vet between different options, marketing, or even marketing people, right? Even if you're trying to bring some more in-house, like,
Yeah.
how does a business who's not rooted in that already know how to hire?
That, well, I mean, they wouldn't technically know how to hire based on that, but what they would want to do is hire someone who does know how to hire based on that. And that's something at Netflix. Reed did that. He's a software engineer. He built a software company and sold it prior to Netflix, but he didn't know anything about the movie business. He didn't know anything about shipping DVDs and that kind of stuff. So he hired, like, I jokingly refer to it as a council of elders, but they were all, around the same age as him. But expert in ops who could build out the shipping of DVDs, expert in entertainment who was in Hollywood, who had tons of relationships with studios and stuff. Leslie Kilgore, who came in from marketing, she was at Amazon prior to Netflix, and then P&G prior to Amazon. So she had both the analytical mind and the brand understanding the value of brand, and so on. Like CFO, CTO, all these folks were subject matter expertise, subject matter experts, and they could then go and recognize what needed to be hired, and do that hiring. A small business owner, the biggest thing is to figure out who they can bring in to work on things. But there's another thing that you could do is you could create a sort of educational checklist. Be like, okay, you have a website, great. Is it connected to Google Analytics? Yes, no, no. The reason why you want to connect it to Google Analytics, and it's basically almost like an educational cheat sheet for them to understand what they're missing out on.
Yeah.
That can then would help them understand why they would need to engage with you or the agency,
Yeah.
and get things cleaned up, because they can be vastly more efficient and grow their business.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah.
And we're at Kaizen, we are in the midst of creating a kind of self-assessment with regard to brand positioning and messaging. So that companies can kind of go, well, we don't actually have all that. Maybe this is something we need. Or they could say, yeah, we've got all that. We're good.
Yeah.
And it's just to kind of get them thinking about brand in a way that's different than a lot of people talk about brand, as we talked about earlier.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yes.
Like we're working with the European Youth Forum right now, and we are purposely stripping out the word brand and branding from all of this stuff. We're doing perception benchmarking. And the reason for that is because of the negative perception of branding as a marketing fluff term. So yeah, it's pretty interesting to see how people perceive branding in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's different, right? The being inside the circle and being out, it's a very different, and some of the people inside the circle don't have a great view because of that either. Certainly on the performance side and that side of things. But I am going to chalk this up as a personal win for, like, I'm glad that we didn't call this Brews and Branding.
Yeah, no, I actually know. I think that's a good move. Although I will say when I saw Brews and BizDev, I'm like, so we're going to talk sales? Like,
yes. Yeah, I realized, then there's no word that's not going to encompass enough, right?
Yeah.
Brews and business, like, now we've gone way too wide, and I don't want to talk to any more accountants.
No, I get that, and like you can't say brews and growth because it doesn't. There's no alliteration there. So
right, yeah, I know, and I'm an alliteration freak, and it really just pulls the whole thing apart. Then we'll have to think of a better idea for the whole concept, and we're trying to stay agile with this whole setup here. So
I get it.
So one thing I did want to touch on, and this is a popular, and I saw you reposted on LinkedIn that article. Actually, I read the article earlier. Reed's article in the New York Times. I forget where it was.
Oh yeah, the profile in New York Times.
The interview that he had done, and and I'm someone who years ago when I was doing like organizational development work, would that the infamous slide deck. From Netflix was an example I would use, not for like, here's the values you should have, though I did like a few of them myself, but it was more about a demo of like, here's how you build out from the inside. And even along the lines of what you're saying, like how we built the team, right? You get people who know how to do the other stuff and who would know how to hire and build from there. And then you have this framework. And even though some people vehemently disagree with some of the principles, some of the values, some of the execution on those things, it stuck. Like it actually, that was, it seems, how things were run, to even where Ms. McCord helped put it together and then got subjected to the same thing when they made a horrible mistake. I did enjoy in the interview how they're like, but do you really think, because like there was a big thing right there, do you really think the board would take you out? And he basically said like, yeah, I guess it's unproven, so it doesn't sound very credible, because he's not the one who got taken out with that situation. So one thing is, like, if you're in a culture like that, I can say, sitting here talking, like, okay, I know you're pretty fucking good at what you do, because you wouldn't have been at Netflix for 11 years in that culture if you weren't.
Thank you.
Right. So that's a credibility boost, and I'd love to hear from the inside, right? Like, what is your, and this is not the expose attempt, but just like from the marketing perspective, right? Because it's one thing being a software developer or something like that, where the metrics are going to be different. What constitutes excellence versus adequate is going to be very different and sometimes harder to measure. So from a marketing perspective, what was it like being in that culture where it's that set and it's excellence or nothing? What would you say you got from it positive? And what would you say, like, now that, you're running your own thing, what are the things you definitely left behind that weren't so positive?
Well, let's see. So I think I got a lot from it. And I think the company definitely did. Like, we were able to punch so far above our weight for the size of company we were. And it was all, I think largely, maybe not all, but largely due to the fact that we had this culture in place, because it made us ridiculously efficient, and it cut down on the amount of politics that usually takes place in a company. We were like 99% of our effort was focused on getting stuff out on the streets to the people. And in the New York Times profile, Maureen O'Dowd mentions like how Ayn Randian, and it's like, I have to disagree, because I think Uber is what you get when you get Ayn Rand. That's the kind of culture that just anything goes and you're ruthless.
Yeah.
Netflix, part of the reason why it had that slide deck that was so long was it wanted to be abundantly clear to employees what the company what the employees should expect from the company, what they should expect from each other, and what the company should expect from them. So it was something that wasn't just created and dropped and done. Like, it emerged in 2001 or 2002, I think it was. And I remember when they announced it, I'm like, oh, high performance culture. Okay, sure. But then over time, you got to see how it started to transform efficiency within the company. Even within our hiring practice, it made things more efficient. And it got worked on every quarter by directors and above. We'd always have a business offsite, quarterly business review. There's a day and a half where we'd go off somewhere, and different areas of the company would present on what went well, what didn't go well, what's the plan. And then we'd also have some other information sharing as well. And then we'd also talk about the culture deck. Mm-hmm. And so every quarter it was parts of it were revisited to make sure that, are we living up to it? Does it actually still make sense? Should some of it go? Should some of it stay? So it was a living document. It was never this is it. Yeah. And I will say that in my experience in marketing, I thought it was pretty brilliant. And it's weird because, like, when I left, part of the reason I left is because marketing had to transform from being about customer acquisition and conversion to purely marketing like a movie studio. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I've done 11 years. I don't know if there's any. And I worked with the VP on the product side to see if there was another place for me in the company. And it felt like I was trying to force a square peg in a round hole. Yeah. So I left. And as you point out, Patty was ousted. And I don't know if you saw the news, I think it was yesterday, Cindy Holland, the VP of content, who has been there since the DVD aggregation days in content, working with Ted, has left the company because someone else was selected to head up for international television series. But if you look at where the company was headed, that makes sense because that's the future for Netflix, and that wasn't her strong suit. And so, like a professional sports team, they basically opted for the player that can fill that role. Yeah. And when I left Netflix in 2012, we were doing all marketing and branding work in all channels for US, Canada, Latin America, UK, and Ireland, and we were maybe 40 people. Like, the only thing we didn't do was shoot TV ads or record radio ads. Mm-hmm. But we worked on the script with them and did consumer research for them. Wow. And that included not just marketing, but within marketing, we had PR and comms. Mm-hmm. And we had FP&A. So it was a very efficient organization. And I think that culture is what enabled us to be that efficient. Yeah. I don't know. I thought it was, and again, like, someone else who worked in, say, engineering or ops could have a different experience. The hope is that nobody has a different experience, mm-hmm. that pretty much everyone feels the same way. And it's not for everyone, that's for sure. Because you get open, honest feedback and you get it quickly. And pretty quickly if you're heading down the wrong track. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Is there anything in particular about that you said, great for Netflix? Not necessarily, I mean, none of it like has to apply everywhere, right? Because that's not, culture shouldn't have to do that. That's not appropriate. But is there anything specifically like, here's how we ran it there, and very intentionally like, no, we're not going to do that going forward with any of, whether it's Kaizen or anything going forward, where you're like, what, definitely great. That was great there. And I'm just not going to do it.
I don't know. I think that they probably made improvements to it. But I don't know if there's anything that I consciously said, well, we're not doing that. That was a terrible idea. There was nothing that I would not take forward?
Like, what's the vacation policy at Kaizen?
It's the same as at Netflix. There is no vacation policy.
Nice.
You take, if everything is taken care of, take the time off, and just let us give the appropriate people a heads up. Make sure no client or anyone here is left in the lurch.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good.
Cover yourself and do what you need to. Yeah.
Yeah, that is one of the key things that I thought was amazing about the Netflix culture, was the whole idea that, look, we're hiring, what the process was, hire the best, pay them top of the market, and get out of their way. So get out of their way meant reduce things that would be tedious or onerous that don't need to happen. So if you're a fully formed adult who's the best at what you do, and I'm paying you top of market, why do you have to ask another adult for permission for vacation? And why do they have to approve it? And why do we have to track it? And why do we have to do all this process if we're adults?
Yeah.
So, and it's the same thing with expenses at Netflix. It was just like, spend your money like it's ours. And, you know, yes, on international flights, you can do business class because those are long flights and we're expecting you to work. But just don't be dumb.
Yeah.
I loved it. I couldn't believe it. And it's funny because I went in-house with one other company, and I was only there for 11 months. And what was interesting to me was when I first started, when my business partner and I were both recruited into it, and we looked at what they were about and what they were talking about and how they ran the company, I'm like, this is as close to Netflix as I've seen. In reality, it was not. It's one of those things where it's like it's on the other side of the line of what Netflix was, and instead of being this well thought out, considered thing, it just happened to look like Netflix, but was more chaotic and not very well run. So that's one thing that's interesting, is to note that, you know, even if it looks like it's a great company culture, it might not be.
Yes. Yeah. It's that's worth noting, and that goes on because we're hard driving or because it seems so chill side, right?
Yeah.
So like the companies who have, like, you know, like all the cliches, the beanbag chairs and the whatevers, and we're going to provide you all like the fun stuff and then still hope that you work, or the like, yeah, you know, you better be, you know, adequate work, just gets generous severance, I believe, something like that. That was, frankly, one of my favorite things there, definitely. But that's not for everybody, and plenty of people obviously lay out their values and their principles and all that, and it's bullshit, right? It's nothing. And I mean, I don't think it gets any more classic than Enron. An example with their literally etched in stone in the lobby, ethics and communication and whatever. So a lot of people do that. And what I always loved was that it seemed like, whether even people thought to a fault, right? Like Netflix was not doing that. They were doing here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing it, and we're going to do it this way. It's not bullshit. It's not marketing, right? It's not like something we're putting out there for you guys, though then it became that too, and that becomes helpful. Sure. But, you know, this is really how it is, and this is going to be the DNA, and that's going to be it. Yeah, no, when Patty and Reed talked about the culture, the culture deck and the culture Netflix, they said, we want to build a company that's great to be from. In other words, when you look back on your career and you look back on your time at Netflix, we want you to go, that was the best place I ever worked. And what kind of things make that happen? What are the things that are the levers that would cause you to think that when you're looking back? And a lot of it is, you're an adult. We trust you. Let's kick ass. Yeah. So. Yeah. And some people, yes, do not want to be treated as adults. So that wouldn't be a good fit. Plenty of people did not, and it just didn't work out. And that's how it goes. Yeah, of course. Yeah. And there's somewhere else for them. Right. Go to HP. Exactly. Not to throw shade at HP. You know, like a big corporation where it's easy to get layered in, and you don't, like, performance reviews are perfunctory and once a year, and you check the boxes and you disappear again for another year, and your job's not required or relevant anyway, so it doesn't matter that you work how you work. Right. But the flip side of that is you've dedicated yourself to a life of collecting a paycheck and uninteresting work. Yeah. And for me, Netflix was always interesting. I mean, I still collected a paycheck, but it was
it was like, you know, I got there and we were DVDs, and it's like, okay, cool, we got to grow big on DVD, and then we're gonna do international expansion, and then we pulled that back because Amazon was rumored to be coming in, and then Walmart came after us, but they didn't do a good job, so we beat them back, and then Blockbuster started to falter, and then we introduced streaming. Like, it just kept evolving.
Yeah.
Because Reed's leadership and his uncanny ability to think strategically. The one thing that as you pointed out earlier, that where he didn't do that was with Quickster, of course.
Yeah.
Where he decided to divide the company. But, you know, speaking of Quickster, that actually highlights one of my beliefs of why Quickster was such a failure was because we'd done such a great job of building the brand. Our brand promise from about 2004 until they switched to Netflix Originals, which I don't know what it is now, was movie enjoyment made easy. Everything we had to do had to be about making movie enjoyment made easy. And that includes shipping DVDs, streaming, cancellation, anything to do with customer service. All that had to be just tie back to that concept of movie enjoyment made easy. And we say, oh, you know what? We're going to break the service into 2 different sites, 2 different services, 2 different queues, 2 different light on it. It just complete 180 handbrake against the brand promise that we'd spent years paying off.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's the only reason, but I'm saying that was a cognitive disconnect for the consumer.
No, that's yes. I mean, certainly I wouldn't have thought of it that way because I wasn't aware of that brand promise, right? I would see the customer side when I saw that, and I thought, like, holy shit, like, are you kidding me? Like, that doesn't, like, I'm not going to do that. Like, here's the part where then the DVDs go away, right? Because I'm not doing these separate things. I'm not going to, like, that's not, but it's amazing from the inside that, like, yeah, that's the promise, and you violated the promise. And that promise is, you've been successful. You've been so successful in actually having that out there that is people's experience. And not so much right now. And then here comes the bloodshed, right? So
a little bit more background on Quickster, by the way. It was not just going to be DVDs by mail. The idea was we had built out this series of hubs and mini hubs throughout the country so that our customers were getting their DVDs in one business day via the post office, which was insane. Like, customers, when they first signed up and they got it in the mail, like the next day, they're like, what is this? Like, it was magic. Did great wonders for a word of mouth, but it was like, well, we've got the infrastructure set up. What if we were able to take a little piece of Amazon's business? And so the idea with Quickster wasn't just going to be DVDs. It was going to then sell video games, diapers.
Okay, yeah.
The idea, but the problem was that the whole thing was supposed to be rolled out over, like, we were supposed to plan it out over months and then roll it out at a certain time. Apparently the press found out about it and was going to report on it. And so it got condensed to, like, weeks.
Yeah.
And so all the stuff you saw, like, we didn't secure the Twitter handle, and everyone's like, how dumb are they? They didn't secure it. It's like, that was on the list to do, but we didn't have time to do it.
Leaks. And
the whole messaging around it was not ideal, because I think they wanted to hold back the idea that it would be more than just DVDs because they didn't want to tip their hand to Amazon. But that also backfired, because then people were like, well, why would I want a separate service for DVDs, like you pointed out?
Yeah. I mean, some of us were waffling and about to cut that loose anyway, right? So, like, I like the streaming better. And I was a convert from the Blockbuster Online. I lived in LA at the time, and some friends I knew, so 2000. Actually, no, this was even in 2004.
Okay.
Where, you know, still heavy. The people I knew were doing mostly the DVDs thing, and you know, despite my hatred for Blockbuster and the amount of money I'd paid over the years, because I've never ever returned something on time in my life. You know, like they had then that offering that they came out with the Blockbuster Online or whatever, where you could both, right? So you could still wander into a store if you wanted to and impulsively buy or rent something, which is why I kept that. And then as soon as they pulled some feature off that, I'm like, all right, I'm out. Because
that's the thing that the interesting thing about this, and I'm not trying to turn this into a Netflix show, but it kind of ends up happening sometimes. But the interesting thing is that Netflix, the business, the way they approached DVDs and that whole business was counterposition not only to Blockbuster, but to the entire industry. Because everyone rented movies the way Blockbuster did. You came in, you picked one up, you rented it, you had to get it back, or there was a late fee. And so, which meant that if anyone tried to do what Netflix was doing, they would go bankrupt because they would miss those late fees.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the financials didn't work out for Blockbuster Total Access, which is the program you're talking about. And it was a serious threat. Like, and had they deeper pockets, they might have been able to put a dent in Netflix. But even then, streaming, they would never have gotten as far as Netflix did, because they didn't have the technical expertise in-house, and they were trying to outsource it to other companies that also weren't in the entertainment world. So whereas Netflix, that's all we did, technology and entertainment. So, yeah.
Well, if there's, I don't know if there's a company that I've ever been happier that doesn't exist anymore than on a personal level than Blockbuster. So it's always been a personal thank you to Netflix.
Well, here's the fun thing. When we did our brand repositioning project in 2004, really quickly, we would ask people like, hey, do you like renting movies from Blockbuster? And almost everyone would say, yeah, that's fine. So, okay, let's walk through it. What's the process? Well, first you got to get in the car. Well, first you got to get whoever's going in the family and get them in the car, which takes about 20 minutes. And then you get down to the Blockbuster and hopefully you find parking. And then they go step by step. And by the time they got the late fees, they realized, I hate Blockbuster. Or at least I hate what the actual experience is. And I really believe that because there was that large pool of hate for Blockbuster, we were able to tap into it, make it a large pool of love for Netflix.
Yes. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And yes, it's not like I hate the company or the people in it, obviously, but the model sucked. I was a person in it also. Fun fact, I worked for a very short time in a Blockbuster location and talk about fake company cultures. It's not the person who wants to like say hello to everyone and like ask 3 or 4 mandated sales questions in every single interaction. I mean, it was garbage. It was garbage. I liked the free rentals while I was there, but there's a lot about that was just so old school, and that they were never going to be able to get themselves in position to move into anything new. And peace out, Blockbuster. Here's me pouring one out on their grave.
I know exactly.
But let's wrap. I'm gonna let you move on with your, well, it's a little earlier for you than it is for me, but move on with your afternoon here. And exactly. But I definitely appreciate the time. And yes, it turned into a Netflix conversation, but still relevant. I mean, that brand promise thing, that is a great viewpoint to look at that from, and then how quickly the damage can hit, and how severe it can be when you violate what people expect from you. And
it also speaks to the actual power of having a brand promise that signals internally and externally, right? The movie Enjoyment Made Easy, sure, that's what we wanted people to think of externally, customers to think of when they thought of Netflix, but also guided how we thought about feature development, customer service, all that kind of stuff, right? So having a really great brand position is just pivotal, I think. If you want to build like a 100-year company, or you want to build a freestanding company that can grow into something like Netflix did.
Yeah.
A lot of companies now get built to sell, so they don't really pay too much attention.
Scale, sell, and
start. Fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but I mean, it depends on what the goals are of the people who are starting it.
No doubt. Well, again, appreciate the time. Really appreciate the input. And if when I'm out in the West Coast at some point, I'll check out the beer as well.
If you come out to San Jose,
you can't ship it.
If you come out to San Jose or San Francisco, let me know, and we'll meet up. And this place is rife with craft breweries, although some have shut down because of the pandemic. But still plenty around right now doing to-go sales. So when things blow over, knock on wood, come on out and have some beer.
It's a plan. Sounds good, Barry. Thanks so much, man.
You bet. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.